Hey, I'm Alex. I'm not the one to make a big deal out of things, but this situation with my parents has been spiraling out of control, and I can't keep quiet about it anymore. My parents, John and Linda, are the kind of people who think they can talk their way out of anything, that if they say it enough times, people will just give in. I've always been the responsible child in the family, the one they relied on when things got tough, but they didn't always see it that way. You see, growing up, I watched them make one bad decision after another. They couldn't hold onto money to save their lives, overspending on luxuries they didn't need, never budgeting properly, always living beyond their means. Every time they'd come to me with their hands out, asking for help, I'd lend them money or help with their bills, thinking that eventually they'd get their act together. But they didn't. They just kept digging themselves deeper. Now, I'm 30, I have my own place, and I've worked hard to build something for myself. It's not a mansion, but it's mine. A little two-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood, just enough space for me to feel comfortable. I've been living here for a few years now, and it's the first time in my life that I've felt like I've finally made it. But of course, my parents didn't see it that way. It all started a few months ago when they showed up on my doorstep, unannounced. I wasn't expecting them. I had just gotten back from a long day at work, tired as hell, and when I opened the door, there they were, standing in front of me with those sheepish, apologetic smiles they always put on when they wanted something. "Hey, Alex," my dad said, his voice a little more hesitant than usual. "We need to talk." "Yeah?" I asked, trying to mask the exhaustion in my voice. I didn't have time for another one of their help us out requests, but I could tell this was different. The look on their faces was serious. "Can we come in?" "We need to discuss something important," my mom added, a little too eagerly. I stepped aside, letting them into the living room, already bracing myself for whatever they had planned. I couldn't say no. I was always the one they turned to when things fell apart. But this time, something in my gut told me it wasn't going to be a simple request. We sat down, and the conversation started innocently enough. They tried to ease into it, talking about how hard things had been for them lately. It wasn't the first time they'd complained about financial struggles, but this time, it seemed different. "We've been going through a rough patch," my dad began. "You know how it is. The economy's been tough, and we made some bad decisions, but we're trying to fix it." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. I didn't want to sound too cynical, but I'd heard this all before. There was always an excuse, always something that had caused their problems. Then, they dropped the bombshell. "We've been looking at our options, and we were hoping you could help us out." My mom looked at me with those puppy dog eyes that always made me feel guilty. "Alex, we're not asking for money this time. We need a place to stay." I blinked, caught off guard. "What? A place to stay? What do you mean?" My dad chimed in, his voice getting a little more desperate. "Our finances are completely shot, Alex. We can't keep up with the bills anymore, and we don't have anywhere else to go. We were thinking, maybe we could move in with you, just for a little while until we get back on our feet." I froze. My heart sank. They were asking me, no, demanding me to let them move into my home? I was speechless for a second. I could feel the weight of their words pressing down on me. This wasn't just about a temporary favor. No, they were planning to stay indefinitely. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. "I don't know, Mom, Dad. I don't think that's a good idea. I have my own space, and I've worked really hard to make this my home. I don't think I can just take you both in. You've been here before, and it's always been temporary. But this time," my mom's face shifted instantly from desperate to defensive. "What are you saying, Alex? You're a child. We raised you, gave you everything we had, and now that we need help, you can't even offer us a roof over our heads." I could feel the guilt trip coming, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. "It's not like that. It's just, you owe us, Alex," she snapped, cutting me off. "All those years we spent raising you, sacrificing for you, and now you can't even do this one thing for us?" I was taken aback by her tone. This wasn't the mother who used to tell me I could always count on her. This was something else. She wasn't asking for help, she was demanding it, as if I was obligated. My dad jumped in then, his voice more forceful. "This is what family does, Alex. You help out when it counts. You can't just leave us out in the cold. You have no idea how hard things are right now." I was getting angry now. "I understand you're struggling, but that doesn't mean I'm required to put my life on hold for you. I'm not your safety net." Their faces darkened, the smiles from earlier vanishing. "Well, if you're not willing to help us," my dad said, his tone shifting, "I guess we'll have to figure out something else." There was a pause as I stared at them, realizing that this wasn't just about moving in anymore. They were about to pull out all the stops to make me feel guilty enough to cave in. "I'm not saying no, but you're asking for a lot here," I replied, trying to stay calm, but inside I was already feeling the tension build. "We're your parents, Alex," my mom said, standing up. "You owe us for everything we've done for you. All we're asking for is a place to stay while we get back on our feet." I could feel the heat rising in my chest, my patience slipping away. This wasn't just a simple request anymore. It was a full-on demand, and my parents were acting like I had no right to say no. It was like they thought I owed them everything just because they raised me. And that's where they were wrong. "I'm not going to let you just move in here like it's nothing," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've worked hard for this place, and it's mine. I'm not in a position to take on both of you." My dad shook his head, like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You really don't get it, do you? This isn't just about you anymore. It's about family. You're turning your back on us when we need you the most. How could you live with yourself knowing we're struggling and you have the means to help?" My mom joined in, her voice dripping with fake sadness. "I'm so disappointed in you, Alex. We've always supported you, and now when it's our turn, you can't even give us a place to stay? I guess you don't care about us the way we cared about you." She wiped away an exaggerated tear, making sure I saw it. The guilt tripping was thick, but it wasn't working. I'd had enough. This was the same act I'd seen 100 times before, and I wasn't buying it anymore. "You've made terrible financial decisions, and now it's my responsibility to fix it?" I said, my voice sharp. "I can't help you just because you spent all your money on stupid things." I stood up, feeling the weight of the conversation finally settling on me. "Look, I'm sorry things are tough, but you're not coming here. You need to figure this out on your own. I'm not your fallback." There was a long silence. My parents exchanged a glance, and I could tell that their plan to emotionally manipulate me was starting to unravel. But instead of backing down, they doubled down. My dad let out a long, frustrated sigh. "I can't believe you're making this so difficult. You don't understand what it's like to be in our shoes." He stood up and paced a little, rubbing his forehead. "You're making us out to be the villains here, but all we're doing is asking for help. What kind of child refuses to help their parents in need?" I felt the anger bubbling up again. "You're not helpless. You're just irresponsible. And I'm not going to let you guilt me into giving you a free ride." At that point, I was done. I'd had enough of their manipulation, their guilt trips, their sense of entitlement. But I wasn't prepared for what came next. My parents didn't take rejection well. The next morning, I woke up to a surprise. As I was making my coffee in the kitchen, I heard a knock at the door. It was way too early for anyone to be visiting, especially with the drama from the night before still fresh in my mind. I figured it was probably my parents again, coming to beg, but I wasn't ready to deal with them yet. I opened the door, and sure enough, there they were, both standing on my front porch with stern faces. "We need to talk," my dad said, without even so much as a greeting. "Not now. I don't want to do this again," I replied, ready to shut the door. But before I could, my mom stepped forward, blocking the entrance. "You're not getting away with this, Alex," she said, her voice cold and firm. "We're not leaving until you do the right thing." I could feel my stomach drop. I'd been expecting some kind of escalation, but this was beyond what I thought they'd do. They were literally trying to force their way into my house. "What are you talking about?" I said, confused but increasingly alarmed. "We've thought about it, and we're not leaving until you let us move in," my dad said, his tone final. "You can't just push us away like this. We're your parents. You owe us. You have to help us." "Dad, get out of the way," I said, trying to keep my cool. "This is my home, and I've told you, and oh." But they didn't move. My mom stepped forward, her eyes narrowed in frustration. "You don't understand. We have nowhere else to go. We can't keep living like this. If you don't help us, then you're no better than the people who've abandoned us. You owe us this, Alex. Don't make us beg." It was becoming clear they weren't leaving anytime soon. I took a step back, suddenly feeling cornered. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't just a request anymore. It was a demand, and they weren't going to take no for an answer. "Stop. I'm telling you, leave. Now," I said, my voice shaking with anger. But they stood there, unmoving. This wasn't about family anymore. This was about control, and they weren't going to stop until they had their way. I could feel my blood boiling. I wasn't going to back down. They couldn't just barge in and take over my life like this. This was no longer a simple family disagreement. This was an invasion of my space, my life, and my peace of mind. I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm, but my patience was wearing thinner by the second. I'm not doing this anymore, I said, my voice steady despite the anger bubbling inside me. I've asked you nicely. I've tried to reason with you, but now you're forcing this on me. And I'm done. I'm calling the cops. Both of them froze. For a moment, there was silence. My dad looked at me, almost as if I had slapped him. He blinked a few times, his face turning red with a mix of frustration and disbelief. You're calling the cops, he said, his voice rising. You're going to call the police on your own parents? My mom stepped forward, her expression hardening. This is how you repay us? After everything we've done for you? You're going to call the cops because we need help. Her voice was thick with outrage, but there was also a hint of fear. I could see the wheels turning in her head. She knew I wasn't bluffing. I'm calling the cops, I repeated firmly. I wasn't giving in, no matter how much they tried to manipulate me. They had already crossed a line by refusing to respect my boundaries, and I wasn't going to let them do it any further. I reached for my phone in my pocket, but before I could unlock it, my mom grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight, and I could feel the anger in her touch. You're making a huge mistake, Alex, she spat. You think you're better than us? You think you can just shut us out? You owe us. We did everything for you when you were little. How dare you turn your back on us like this? Her words hit me like a slap in the face. It was the same tired, guilt-tripping speech they'd given me time and time again, but now it felt more suffocating than ever. They had no right to manipulate me like this. I had worked hard to get to where I was, and I wasn't about to let them ruin that for me. I shoved her hand off my arm. No, you're the ones making a mistake. You think you can come in here, take over my house, and manipulate me into giving you a place to stay just because you feel entitled to it? No. My dad clenched his fists, his face turning redder with each word I said. If you do this, you'll regret it, he warned, his voice low and dangerous. You're destroying this family. You're going to be the one who's alone when we're gone. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I didn't flinch. I was done listening to threats. Goodbye, Dad, I said, and I quickly pulled my phone out, dialing the non-emergency line for the police. I could hear my parents arguing in the background as I waited for the line to connect. My dad was shouting now, demanding I open the door. You can't do this. You'll be sorry, Alex. We're your parents. But I didn't open the door. I didn't let their words affect me. I just focused on the phone call, waiting for the dispatcher to answer. 911. What's your emergency? I took a deep breath, trying to stay as calm as possible. Hi, I need to report a situation at my house. My parents are here, and they're trying to force their way into my home. They're making threats and refusing to leave. I've asked them to leave multiple times, and now they're being aggressive. The dispatcher's voice was professional and calm. Okay, sir, I understand. We'll send someone to your location. Stay on the line, and do not open the door unless you're certain it's law enforcement. I thanked the dispatcher, hanging up just as I heard my dad pounding on the door. His voice was muffled, but I could hear the fury in his words. You're going to regret this, Alex. You've just destroyed everything. But I was done. I wasn't going to give in to their manipulation anymore. I backed away from the door and took a few steps into the living room, my mind racing. I couldn't believe this was happening. I thought I was done with all the drama, but now it seemed like it was escalating faster than I could keep up with. A few minutes later, I heard sirens outside. My stomach twisted in knots, but I stayed put, waiting for the cops to arrive. When they finally pulled up, I felt a mix of relief and dread. This wasn't how I'd wanted things to go, but my parents weren't leaving me with any other choice. I opened the door just enough to let the officers inside. Please, take care of this, I said, my voice trembling with a mix of exhaustion and anger. The officers stepped in, immediately sizing up the situation. My parents were standing there, arms crossed, looking more defiant than ever. You need to leave, one of the officers said firmly, his tone no nonsense. We've been called here for a disturbance. You're not allowed to force your way into this home. My dad opened his mouth to argue, but the officer cut him off. I suggest you leave now, or you'll be arrested for trespassing. The silence in the room was deafening. My mom looked at my dad, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. But it was short-lived. They weren't done yet. The officers stood firm, and after a long, tense stare-off, my parents seemed to realize that their manipulation tactics weren't going to work this time. They stood there for a moment, glaring at me, trying to figure out their next move. It was clear to me that they were frustrated, but also not ready to completely give up. I could hear my mom mumbling something under her breath as she backed away from the door. This isn't over, she muttered. You'll regret this, Alex. You'll see. She and my dad exchanged a few heated words as they turned to leave, their heads hanging in defeat. The officers gave them a final warning to stay off the property, and with that, they turned and left. For a moment, I thought maybe that was it, that the tension was finally over. But I should have known better. It wasn't long before I started seeing posts on social media. My phone buzzed repeatedly, each notification more explosive than the last. First, there was a post from my mom. Her profile picture was of our whole family when we were still close. She had a way of using old photos to tug at heartstrings. So disappointed in my son today. I've given him everything, and this is how he repays me? I'm just a mother who's always been there for him. Is this the kind of child he's going to be? A selfish one? I don't know how he can sleep at night knowing he's throwing his own parents out on the street. The post had barely been up for a few minutes before the comments started rolling in. My mom's friends, a lot of them from her church group, chimed in with their sympathy. Such a shame, Alex. You were raised better than this, one comment read. Another one said, you're in my thoughts, Karen. A mother deserves better than this. Then, my dad posted something too. His tone was much more direct. I raised that kid. I put a roof over his head, fed him, worked day and night to give him everything he has. And this is how he treats me? He'll come crawling back when he realizes what he's done. But I'm not sure I'll be here when he does. I felt the sting of his words, but it was nothing compared to the anger that followed. My phone started lighting up with messages. My siblings were texting me, asking what the hell was going on. My sister, Mia, was the first to reach out. Alex, is everything okay? She asked. What's with all the posts from mom and dad? I've never seen them this upset. I ran my hands through my hair, trying to think of how to explain without sounding defensive. Mia, they're lying. They're trying to make me look like the bad guy because I won't let them move into my house. They've done this before, manipulating me, using guilt to get what they want. I've had enough. She responded almost immediately, but don't you think you should be helping them? You know, they did do a lot for you when you were younger. I get that they're asking a lot, but they're your parents. I stared at the message, my mind racing. I had already tried explaining to her, but I could tell it wasn't sinking in. I needed to talk to her face to face, but my parents had made their move online, spreading their narrative across every platform they could. As if on cue, my phone buzzed again, this time with a message from my aunt. She was one of the more reasonable people in the family. Alex, I don't want to take sides, but I'm seeing these posts from your parents. It's hard to ignore. You've always been so independent, but don't you think it's a little harsh to throw them out like that? Are you sure there's no way you can work something out? I let out a frustrated sigh. This was the last thing I needed right now. My parents had turned to social media to get the family involved, to pit them against me. They were making me look like the villain to everyone who would listen. I sat back down on the couch, rubbing my temples. I had to do something. I couldn't just let them spin this narrative without giving my side of the story. But what could I do? If I responded directly, I would just be playing into their game. If I stayed silent, the narrative would grow, and I'd be left trying to clean up the mess later. I stared at my phone, deciding I'd play it their way. I'd let them keep posting their angry rants online for now. But I knew this wasn't going to end until I made sure my side was heard too. The phone rang again, this time with a call from Mia. Her voice was tight when I picked up. Alex, I don't know what's going on, but this is starting to look bad. People are starting to side with them. They're telling everyone you're being cruel. Even Grandma sent me a message saying you're not showing respect for them. I held my breath for a moment, trying to steady my voice. I am showing respect, but I've had enough, Mia. This isn't about respect. This is about them manipulating me for years. They've crossed a line, and I'm not backing down. She hesitated, clearly torn. I'm not sure what to believe anymore, Alex. Maybe you should just let them stay for a little while, until things calm down. It doesn't have to be forever, right? I could feel my patience wearing thin. Mia, listen. If I give in now, it will never stop. You know how they are. This is about control, not family. I'm not giving them that power anymore. She didn't respond immediately, and I knew the conversation wasn't over. But in that moment, I felt a surge of clarity. I couldn't let my parents' social media posts determine my life. I would take control of my own narrative, one way or another. The notifications kept flooding in as I scrolled through my phone, but I knew that now wasn't the time to reply. I would make my stand, but on my terms. And soon, my parents would see that they couldn't manipulate me anymore. As the night wore on, I continued to watch as my parents flooded social media with their posts, trying to paint me as the villain. They posted pictures of themselves looking miserable, making passive-aggressive comments about how their son has abandoned them, trying to gather sympathy from anyone who would listen. I had had enough. I'd given them more than enough chances over the years to show that they could respect my boundaries, and they had continuously trampled over them. I wasn't going to let this cycle continue. Not now. Not ever. The next day, I sat down and composed my response. I didn't care if it was going to upset some people. It was time to set the record straight. I took a deep breath and started typing. Let's set the record straight. Yes, I asked my parents not to move in. Why? Because they've repeatedly taken advantage of my kindness, made poor financial decisions, and always expected me to bail them out. I've given them my time, my money, and my patience for years. But the line was crossed when they tried to manipulate me into taking them in again, without ever changing their behavior. The truth is, it's not about helping them. It's about control. I've been working hard to build my own life, and I'm not going to let them undo everything just because they feel entitled to my success. This is not about disrespect, but about boundaries. I have a right to say no, and I'm not apologizing for it. To anyone who feels differently, maybe it's time you asked yourself why you're supporting this kind of behavior. I hesitated for a moment, but then hit post. Within minutes, comments started to roll in. Some of my family members, the ones who didn't know the full story, began posting their support for my parents. My aunt, the one who had asked about things earlier, even left a comment asking why I couldn't just let things go for a while. But I noticed the more honest, straightforward comments started to outweigh the manipulative ones. Then, I saw something I wasn't expecting. Mia commented. It was short, but it meant everything to me. I'm sorry, Alex. I get it now. I'll always have your back. You're doing the right thing. It hit me like a wave. Finally, someone understood. The posts from my parents came to an abrupt halt after that. For a while, it felt like they'd retreated into their own little world of bitterness. I didn't care. I had done what I had to do, and now the ball was in their court. They could keep playing their manipulative games, but I wasn't going to be a pawn in them anymore. A week later, I got a phone call from my mom. Her voice was quieter than usual, but the edge was still there. Alex, you don't know how much you've hurt me. I thought you'd always be there for me, and now you've turned your back on me. I paused for a moment. I had no desire to get dragged back into her guilt trips, so I said simply, No, Mom. You don't get to control me anymore. I'm not turning my back on you, but I'm setting boundaries, and I expect you to respect them. If you need help, I'll be here, but on my terms. I won't keep letting you manipulate me into thinking that you're the only one who matters. There was silence on the other end, and I knew she wasn't happy, but for once, it felt like I had the power. They never did come back to my house after that. The social media posts eventually stopped as well. It wasn't easy, but I realized that standing up for myself was the most important thing I could do. No amount of guilt or manipulation could change that. I was done being their doormat, and the world didn't end because of it. And just like that, I reclaimed control over my life. My parents learned a hard lesson that day, one that I had been trying to teach them for years. Family can be complicated, but sometimes you have to draw a line in the sand and say, enough is enough. They didn't change overnight, but I did, and that's what mattered.